everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. My name is Esme, and I'm a producer for the How To Academy, and it is my delightful job this evening to introduce our two guests. So joining us tonight is Marie Forleo. Marie is a writer, philanthropist, and entrepreneur who was named by Oprah as a thought leader for our next generation. Tonight, Marie will be talking to the fantastic author, journalist, and podcaster, Pandora Sykes. Together, they'll be discussing how you can really take control of your life and create success even in the current climate of adversity. So Marie and Pandora will speak for around 45 minutes, and then they'll take questions. So if you'd like to ask something, please put it in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Marie Forleo and Pandora Sykes.
Hello.
Yay!
There's always that fear about whether or not it's going to work.
And we're here.
We're here in the comfort of our own homes, obviously. Marie, everything is figureoutable made me laugh out loud, and I think of it as a kind but forthright kick up the backside. This is a somewhat inevitable start to our conversation, but how do you think the book might help those struggling at the moment during the pandemic? And would you have written anything differently if you had known what was to come?
Great questions. So regardless of what's happening in the world, most of us are always navigating something. There is some type of personal challenge we're trying to work ourselves through, whether that has to do with our career, maybe it has to do with our health, that has to do with our relationship, and you compound on the layer on top the things that are happening globally in the society, the fact that we're navigating this global pandemic. It's now just about a year that we're in this thing. We're always trying to figure something out. And one of the things that I've learned over my 20-year career is that, it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter your education. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe in your ability to work through things, to find a way or make a way ahead, it's just not going to happen for you. And so everything is figureoutable, in my view, is absolutely relevant for what we're all experiencing right now. I think everyone's situation is so unique. Again, the suffering, the tragedy, the pain, the awakenings that have happened in everyone's lives are completely different. And yet we're all finding ourselves in and on shaky ground. But when you have this bedrock belief that everything is figureoutable, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have all the answers, and it doesn't mean that the answers are going to come simply or quickly, but it does mean that you're not going to give up. It does mean that you're going to tap into this innate power that I think every human being has to be creative, to be curious, to persevere, to ask questions, and to keep moving forward no matter what's happening around us. Because really, what's the other choice? I think it's really quite depressing, to be honest with you, to give up and to succumb and to just put your hands up in the air and say, well, I can't do anything, so I'm just going to let it all crumble in on top of me. So it's a very pragmatic philosophy. To your second question, would I have written anything different? The honest answer is no, I wouldn't. When I started writing the book and when I started to imagine putting this philosophy down on paper, I was actually in New York City, and I was struggling to write the book, to be honest with you. I'm not one of those people who can just sit down at my keyboard and just like flutter away and be like, oh, this is so joyful. It's not. It was totally painful. I had so much self-doubt. I wanted to do a good job because I respect people's time. And I wanted to make sure that if they took a chance on this book, that it would deliver. And when I was writing it in this restaurant, I ran into a friend who runs a big company called Shopify. It's a Canadian company. And he knows me well, a gentleman named Toby. And he said, Marie, your business is going great. You've got so many projects. Why are you writing a book? Like, this is a big project to take on. I'm sure it's taking you away from other things. He's like, why are you doing this? Why now? And I said, Toby, I don't want this to happen, but if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, this is the one idea that I would want to leave behind. This is the one thing that I feel like if I could do a good enough job explaining this philosophy and how it can help awaken people's innate potential, then I can ride on my unicorn to the next cosmic adventure and be like, I did it. I did it. I did what I came here to do, and see you on the next adventure. So that's why I say I wouldn't have written anything different, because I think the ideas are timeless And I think while this particular crisis that we're in is unique, I don't think it's the last crisis. Hopefully, we're not going to see something like this for a very long time. But even if we're not grappling with something globally, we are going to be grappling with something personally and professionally. And those same tools, those same skills, the same mindset shifts that can help us navigate something as big as this will help us more successfully become what I like to call almost remarkably resilient. That's one of the benefits of adopting this belief, everything is figureoutable, because it's not saying that everything's going to go perfectly. It's not. It's just saying you're not going to let it take you down and keep you down.
The title, which is a really delicious tongue twister, Figureoutable, probably not one if you've had a few drinks, but it comes, as does a lot of your life coaching philosophy, from your childhood. You write really wonderfully about your mum, who sounds like the most incredible character, and every day when you get home from school, she'd be up on the roof fixing something, or she'd be taking something apart in the kitchen, and she never knew how to do it. It was pre-YouTube, but she just trusted that she would figure it out. And she said to you once, everything is figureoutable. What do you say to a conversation we're having a lot at the moment is challenging that sort of idea that of meritocracy, that everyone has the same opportunities? And what would you say to someone who says, but Marie, not everything is figureoutable? You know, there are systemic or social structures that mean that I can't figure this out. What would be your advice in that scenario?
Well, there's a couple things, and this is a really important discussion. It's a really worthwhile discussion, and a place I think we should keep peeling away and looking at. So there's a difference between innate gifts, talents, capability, and opportunity. Those two things are different. So I believe something that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. So the notion that everything is figureoutable says that inside every single human being is the power to grow, to learn, to get better, to rise up. And even in the book, we talk about stories of people who don't look like you and I, who come from very different backgrounds and come from places where there is enormous oppression. You know, there's one story about a friend of mine. Her name is Tererai Trent. And she was born in Zimbabwe. By the time she was about 12 or 13, culturally, her dad had married her off for, I think, the price of a cow to a man who was much older than she was. And I think by the time she was 18, she had 4 kids. And all she wanted was an education. And at that time, in that particular place in the world, it wasn't likely that she was going to get one due to her gender, a lot of other factors. But she didn't let that dream go. In fact, she found a way. She made a way. There's this one piece in the story that I find so remarkable. She wanted to learn how to read and write so badly that she actually borrowed her brother's textbooks, because again, in that particular culture, if there was a boy and the girl, the boy would probably get educated over the girl. And she would go out into the fields. There were cattle herders, and she would grab these enormous leaves. She didn't have a pen. She didn't have paper. She would take the stem of one leaf and the actual leaf of another and trace the alphabet. That's how she taught herself to read. Fast forward, and again, we tell the whole story in the book. She eventually made her way to the United States. It was a dream of hers to study here. She wound up getting her bachelor's, her master's, and her doctorate. And she's forever known as Dr. Tererai Trent. She's amazing. And there are many other stories, both in the book and in the world, of people that come from circumstances who you wouldn't imagine could figure things out and wind up doing so and serve as an inspiration to us all. So I don't think that this is a binary thing. Saying everything is figureoutable doesn't mean it's going to be easy. All social change that we've seen in our world, every scientific breakthrough, every medical breakthrough that we've seen doesn't necessarily happen overnight. You know, we're in this place right now, Pandora, where we've seen in a year, which never has happened before, right? We've developed this vaccine. But years past, breakthroughs like this took what? Sometimes 10 years. When you think about finding a cure for polio, putting a man on the moon, there are so many different things that we've said, oh, well, we've never figured this out before. but human beings with their creativity and their perseverance and their focus eventually got there. And so when we're talking about systemic issues, when we're talking about inequality in the world, when we're talking about some of the biggest challenges we collectively face, it's actually one of the reasons why I was excited to write the book, because I believe the more people who believe that everything is figureoutable, the more we awaken those big, bold, audacious dreamers to help solve some of the biggest problems we face. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't think any one individual does, but I do believe in our collective ability to solve problems and to evolve and to grow together.
And I absolutely should have clarified that the book is stuffed full of people from really difficult backgrounds, some of them. These are not easy things to overcome. And my question was just for anyone who hadn't read the book, because I imagine that could be an immediate response to this idea, which is, well, come on, Marie, not everything is. But you do give incredible examples. And I don't feel like there's any scenario that could be put to you that you wouldn't have a way of shifting the perspective or the point of view.
Well, can I speak to that for a minute? Because, it's great. When I first started sharing the book with the world, and now we've got like a brand new cover, and I love the UK version. This is like one of my favorites. People would say to me, and actually a really good friend of mine who's known me and known my work for a really long time, he texted me, Pandora, and he was like, come on. He's like, are you really saying that everything is figureoutable? He's like, I've been an addict my life. I've dealt with people, who have drug addictions and this and that. Like, this can't possibly be figured out. And so it prompted me to be able to speak into a few aspects of this, which I hope will help people keep an open mind and an open heart about how this idea could serve them. So first off, there's 3 rules to the Figureoutable philosophy. And this really helps us create a mental container so we can use the idea and philosophy for its intended purpose, which is to help keep us curious, to help us move forward in positive action, and to keep growing and learning. And the 3 rules are this. Rule number 1, all problems or dreams are figureoutable. Rule number 2, if a problem isn't figureoutable, it's not a problem, it's a fact of life or a law of nature. Gravity, death, taxes. Rule number 3, and this is the big one, you may not care enough to solve a particular problem or reach a particular dream, and that's okay. Find something you do care deeply about, and then you go back to rule number 1. So what does that do for us? That helps us stay out of fantastical thinking, you know what I mean? And go, well, what about this? And what about that? And go, well, wait, what about your life? What's the one thing in your life that means so much to you that if you put your time and your energy and your focus on it, that you would either create a way to move ahead or you'd shift the perspective on it so the whole thing would transform. And then I want to tell you one more bit, because this speaks to another aspect again, and this is people, which I love them for that, just raising their hand saying, well, what about this? And what about that? How does all this work together? I've had people say to me, but Marie, what about death? Or what about a terminal disease? Or, something like that. How is that figureoutable? And I often tell people about a story I got. So when I first started sharing this idea, Pandora, I was talking about it with my own audience on my own platform. Back in 2016, Oprah invited me to give a talk at an event she was holding called Super Soul Sessions. It was like a one-day event, and you needed to do like an 18-minute style TED Talk. And that was my opportunity for me. I said, I want to test this notion, everything is figureoutable. I kind of want to bring it to a wider audience and see the reception to see if this should be the book I'm going to write. So I did that talk. It went out on Oprah's podcast. And so I started receiving a lot of notes and emails from people who had never seen my work before. They had never watched my show, listened to the podcast, brand new. One of the letters I got was from a woman named Jen. And she said, Marie, I want to thank you so much for your talk that you did for Oprah. My mom has been trying to instill this kind of spirit in me. And in fact, the talk was so good, I sat down and watched it with my mom. She said, but then something interesting happened. My beautiful mom, who's like my best friend in the world, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And suddenly nothing seemed figureoutable. She said, but I took a step back and I looked deeper, and here's what I saw. I saw that I could figure out how to find food that my mom could actually tolerate. I could figure out how to get medical equipment for my mom who lived in a rural area. Most importantly, I could figure out how to help my mom have her last days on planet Earth, which were in fact her last 5 weeks living, existing in the place where she really wanted to be, which was in her own home. So she said, while I wasn't able to quote unquote, figure out the cure, she was able to figure out how to have this beautiful time and help her mom fulfill the rest of her life in a way that really was true to her and her values. So stories like that tell me that it's not necessarily about controlling the outside circumstances, because there are some things that happen in life that is nature, but it shifts how we approach things so that we can bring a level of compassion and curiosity and creativity to whatever we face.
That's such an interesting clarity and distinction. And I also feel like I'm getting my own life coaching sessions. So this is amazing, because I can't see any of our hundreds of listeners and watchers. Marie, you have had a staggering amount of careers. I don't think I've ever read a list of such varied jobs. You've been a Nike dance athlete, a bartender, a publisher at Condé Nast, a trader on Wall Street, a cleaner, and a life coach. And you credit the audacity, that's your word, not mine, of attempting so many careers as what enabled you to start your life coaching business at 23. But you're also really honest about how frustrated with yourself you got as you tried out all of these jobs, and that none of them quite seemed to fit except for life coaching, which you do now. Could you explain a little bit to someone feeling completely in awe of everything you're saying, all the jobs you've held, and perhaps a little scared, how you cultivated that confidence to try these brand new professional skins on?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it wasn't confidence. It was out of pain. It was out of total pain. Meaning, when I found myself on Wall Street and I was showing up, and I don't come from money. I don't come from a family that, I'm the first in my family to actually even go to college and get an education in that form. I was so grateful to have a job on Wall Street. I was grateful for a paycheck. And, in our country, you get health insurance when you have a paycheck. And I wanted to do great. And I put on my game face every day, and I tried so hard to love this job. But about 6 months in, every day, Pandora, when I showed up, I felt like I was dying a slow death. I kept hearing this little voice inside that kept saying, like, this isn't who you are. This isn't what you're meant to do. This isn't who you're meant to be. And at first I was like, shh, like, I can't hear that. I must come to work and I must do a good job. But after trying to shush that little voice for so long, it literally started to make me physically ill. There was one day when I showed up on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And again, I tried to put on that game face and tried to smile and be a good soldier. And I felt myself dizzy and like getting nauseous and sick. And now I look back and I can see what I was starting to have was a little bit of a panic attack. I didn't understand how that even worked back then. But I remember saying to my boss, I was saying, I need to go get some coffee. I need a few minutes. And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I ran out of the floor. And instead of going to get coffee, I made a beeline to the nearest church. So I was raised Catholic and I went to a Catholic university. So I was kind of trained at that point. When you're in crisis, you look up and try and get some kind of insight. So I'm sitting on the church steps, crying my eyes out, feeling like such a loser. I knew how hard my parents worked to put me through school. And I didn't want to bring shame on my family for just quitting and not having another job. Like, who does that? Sounds very irresponsible. And I called up my dad, and I was doing the ugly cry. I could barely breathe. And he was, broke in, and he's like, Ree, calm down. You've been working since you were 9 years old. I'm not worried about you keeping a roof over your head. You'll do whatever you got to do that. He said, but here's the secret to life. You have to find something you love. And clearly you don't love this. If you're calling me right now crying, he's like, I know you've been trying really hard, but if this job is making you this sick, you have to quit. And it might take you a while, and it's not going to be easy. And I can't tell you what that thing is going to be, but you have to keep searching until you find it. And once you find it, you'll know. And so there was something in his advice, Pandora, that set my soul at ease. And I think it was because I realized he wasn't going to judge me, and he wasn't going to think I was like a horrible daughter because I quit a good paying job and didn't have anything else lined up. But I really took his words to heart. And so I didn't so much have a lot of courage, but I didn't want to be in pain. And every career that I tried, I earnestly gave it my best, but I also was paying attention to the inner signals in my intuition and how I felt. And every time like I would hit this 3 to 6 month mark, I would just run into a wall and realize I didn't want to become my boss. I didn't want to climb that corporate ladder. I didn't feel like I was contributing my gifts in any kind of meaningful way. The money wasn't there. The happiness wasn't there. I was like, this is horrible. And I honestly felt like I was broken to a certain degree because I knew I wanted to work hard. I'm not a lazy human being. I knew I wanted to make a difference, but I was like, I just keep wanting to quit every job that I get. And I just felt awful about it. And it wasn't until that one day when I was working in magazine publishing, I was at Mademoiselle, a fashion magazine, no longer here, but was back in the day. And I was on the internet probably when I shouldn't have been. And I stumbled upon a new profession at the time, you guys, 1999 for context, called coaching. And specifically around this new profession and how it was all about strategy and creatively partnering with people. And, all of these things these light bulbs were going off in my head, Pandora. And I was like, oh my goodness, this sounds like me. But the logical part of my brain was like, what? You're 23 years old. Who in their right mind is going to hire a 23-year-old life coach? You haven't even lived life yet. You have piles of debt. You keep quitting every job you have. You're a total loser. What the hell is this? No one's even heard of this before. So all of this was happening at once. Thankfully, my mom had taught me about the power of intuition, and that deeper part of me, Pandora, felt like it was right, even though the mean girl in my head and all of that self-doubt was screaming loud as can be. So fast forward about, 2 or 3 months, I had signed up for this coach training program, which I did all over. It was teleseminar at that time. We didn't have webcams. Again, this is the late 90s. I got a call from the HR department at Condé Nast Publications, and they had a promotion for me. It was for Vogue magazine. So here I was at this fork in the road. Do you say yes to the top fashion magazine in the world, steady paycheck, people kind of understand that job, it's quite prestigious, all of this stuff? Or do you quit and start this life coaching business, which sounds so cheesy and so weird and so completely like the worst idea ever, but something in my body felt like it was right. And so I turned down the Vogue promotion. I quit working at magazines. I went back to waiting tables and cleaning people's houses and doing whatever I needed to do during the day so I could figure out how to build a business from the ground up at night.
And you did that.